Why We Bleep is sponsored by Signal Sounds. I've been stood outside in the rain since 5:54 a.m. and it's currently 7:15 in the evening, and I'm trying to complete a Venn diagram of the so-called drum machines that you can purchase from Signal Sounds. What has happened in the last few years since the D-Fan came out? Where is the snare, the congas, the tom-tom? Drum machines at Signal Sounds are strange. They're elastic beasts, capable of frightening oddity and boosh. They're becoming uncategorizable. There's the metal fetishist drum machine, an insane elastic industrial slam machine designed to tear the faces off kittens at 1,000 yards. There's the Error Instruments passive operator. It's a completely passive drum machine with nothing but jack sockets, and it sounds like Johnny Five is beatboxing. There's the Dubrek stylophone beat. Oh, sure, a drum machine, but it looks like Darth Vader's pager and you play it with a pen. Here's the Chiat Lombard plum butter. Yes, sure, it's a psychogeographical map of the cities of Baltimore and Cleveland by a man who relaxes by setting off smoke bombs in caves. And it sounds like electricity itself has come alive and started dancing. What was wrong with the old paradigms? Why does everything these days have to be so damn innovative and new? Huh? Now, what's this? The Modor DR2. Oh, it looks just like a 909. Designed by Dieter Rams. But finally, it's just a drum machine. Oh God! Each voice is a complete synthesizer in its own right with per-step randomization and parameter locking. So if you've decided that the 808 cowbell can get entirely in the C, visit signalsounds.com. That's signalsounds.com. Why We Bleep is also sponsored by thonk.co.uk. Do you like sounds? Do you like having a great deal of sounds in a very small amount of space? Well, you need to check out the Sebsongs Bread and Butter module. It is a 6 HP module with 128 GM sounds in it, like General MIDI sound bank, plus drums, and it's 64-note polyphonic. And it also has MIDI input, and it also has 1 volt per octave and gate. And you can use both at the same time. So you could be playing drums via MIDI, and you could also be playing a bass line via the 1 volt per octave and the gate. And sonically, it's not like a sort of thin crap kind of General MIDI. It's like got this warm, fuzzed out, slightly kind of 90s rompler sound, which actually just sounds really nice and obviously is something that you could then further process to make even nicer. If you want to have a lot of sounds in a very small space, Bread and Butter from Sebsongs is not going to sound like your trad VCO. What an interesting module. Perfect for that dusty lo-fi project. Visit thonk.co.uk. That's thonk.co.uk. Why? Death to traditional drum machines, like the Roland 808 and 909, eh? No, not me. I will bleed 808 if you cut me. I think there's a place for both things. That is to say, the new and the old and traditional. There's something about that set of sounds in the 808 that is just... it scratches an itch in my brain, and I'm happy to scratch it on a weekly basis. I never want it to go away. And that brings us on to today's guest. Yes, this is Paul Barker, a man who, like the xenomorphs from the Alien franchise, has acid for blood. Paul Barker is the person behind DINSYNC. And if you don't know, DINSYNC is a company who sell the bits that allow you to make an absolutely authentic new 808, 909, 303, 101, or 606, and other things. Now, these aren't for the faint of heart, these kits, because they really are the old thing. Like, for example, you can take his 101 kit and put it inside a Roland SH101 chassis, and it all lines up because it is just a new version of the 101. Paul's work, his life's work, has been to make available things that are otherwise clearly out of production, and who clearly, given what Roland have been releasing, is not something that Roland themselves are interested in pursuing, which is actually something that we talk about in the podcast, his attempt to kind of chase up Roland and see if they'd be interested to kind of make things in collaboration. Paul is the dude, by the way, if you've watched those Super Booth videos that I put up, the sort of weird stream of consciousness ones where it's like a whole, take the journey with me. Paul is the guy who has the acid booth. He's the guy who makes a tent with the 808, the 909, multiple 303s, and you can just jam. They're all linked up. They're all DINSYNC together, and you can just jam and have a little groove in the woods at Super Booth. It's one of the funnest things at the whole show, and it just speaks to the absolute utter joy of those machines. The joy. Yeah. You've heard them a million times, but like, there's nothing so fun as to squawk and squonk and bash some Roland machines that are all synced together through a pair of massive speakers in the woodlands. The old way it was done. And we do talk about the olden days. We talk about the late 80s, 88, 89. He was around in London at that time. He was there at the birth of Acid House. This is going to be a very affable, freewheeling conversation with one of the realest dudes in the industry, a very, very great guy to chat to. So I hope you enjoy this one as much as I did. Let's acid with the man with acid for blood. Thanks.
I mean, for me, music, actually, I was quite lucky because my dad was into splicing tapes, basically. So
really?
Early 70s.
Like music concrete?
No, he wasn't. He was more like trying to make DJ mixes, but not like not DJing like we DJ today, but more like radio DJ programming. So he would splice stuff so it would, change on the downbeat, shit like that. But he'd do it clever. And it was kind of like his hobby. And so he'd be, that's what I first saw when I was about 5. When I first started realizing what was going on. He's there splicing tapes. And he's like, doing funny things. And then he would, when I got more interested in music, my own music rather than his music, because, you like your parents' music anyway, he would make me mixtapes. And he would just play music to me that I liked, that he'd noticed that I'd liked. It wasn't, I wasn't old enough to actually realise what I was listening to. But the things I was gravitating to was stuff like that he would select for me would be just some rock and some Beatles, the sort of generic stuff. But among all that, be things like the Pete Townsend ARP stuff, or what's it called? I Won't Be Fooled Again, and all those sorts of all the ones with those synthy bits. That's what I was getting. So he's just, you don't know where. For me, I think that's when I first started listening to synth music. Beyond it,
did you know it was?
No, I didn't. It was just music that I liked. I was too young to understand if it was actually synth music. I think. I haven't really thought about it, if I'm completely honest. But I loved that because it didn't sound natural, and I think that's what I liked about it. And then later on, when I first saw someone sampling, those old BBC. How to make music. Well. No. The sort of BBC Two stuff, like the how to make music education programs, and they'd be really
the ones
in the 80s. They were really cheesy, really, really sort of basic, super basic. But I used to love all that stuff. And then I saw this guy come on. He had I don't know what sample it was. It was probably a Fairlight or an Ensoniq. It was one of the two. But he had like the typical dog bark and crashing glass samples and all this.
Yeah.
And I'm looking at that, and the first time I saw that, I was amazed because, I mean, I look at it now and I know it's looking at my dad splicing all these tapes. And then looking at this, suddenly there's a guy, it's just like, oh yeah, little sample. And it's like, I was fascinated by that. I was like, that really blew me away, the sampling, you know. And of course, not having any money, being like, I don't know how old I was in the end. I was probably about 12 or something when I saw this. I mean, you know, much later I got into Amigas and Atari ST and all that stuff. So like everyone else did. But right there and then, right at the peak, because there was no samplers around at all. That's the funny thing about samplers, actually, because samplers have become expensive again because people realize that the converters are half the fucking ticket. I mean, it really, you know, there's nothing like that Akai time stretch. I mean, you can do a software one, but without running it through the converters, it doesn't sound the same. It's something special in that box. And you can emulate to the hilt, but why bother? Just get the original, because they used to be $50. But now, or 50 quid, they're like 500 now again.
There's been like a big like dip. They're becoming expensive again now because everyone craves them. They're expensive to start with, man. Like my prices.
Yeah, my first one sampler was a E6400.
Oh wow.
The classic. Yeah, I bought that around 2000, and that cost me fucking 1,000 quid, and that was a lot of money.
That's a Rolls Royce. Right, it's like a proper workhorse.
I still got it. It still works. I had to replace all the tack switches. They kind of wore out over time. But it's it's a good machine.
I want to hear about the sort of your formative kind of the rave experiences. Where were you, and then how do you then get into the gear? I assume the music came first, but maybe
it's a funny thing about the rave thing, right? Because it was always better last year, and you have to remember that when people say, "Oh yeah, I was there in '88." No, you weren't. There was people there in '88, but it wasn't. The Summer of Love truly was '89, because that's when everyone turned on to it, like on a massive scale. It wasn't. It came out of the clubs. Now, if you go up north, it was happening there 2 years before. And people in London don't want to admit it, but 87, 88 is where it was really happening up north. And that's just the way it is, you know. The whole thing kicked off properly 89. It was when all the proper parties were. All the things that were worth going to happened in 89, I think, because the scene wasn't... The government didn't know what to do. And the sun was going, the dangers of acid house. And yeah, of course it's dangerous if kids take drugs. There's no denying that. But the establishment wasn't worried about that. They were worried about a lot of people all on the same page and not being against, not with any real strict agenda. And that's kind of troubling to them because maybe those people can be manipulated into swinging one way or another on some issues. And they didn't like it. They didn't like the freedom.
It's definitely a fundamental lack of understanding, like a complete misunderstanding.
Well, it's a generational gap, isn't it?
Did they think it was dangerous, or that these kids were actually going to?
But the thing is, they've been doing it for years. I mean, what was happening in the '60s with the mods? What were they doing? They were dancing with speed all night. And what the rave kids were taking ecstasy and acid. And well, they were doing that in the '60s too, and they were doing in the '50s. It was booze and gin or whatever. It was all. It's all just youth quakes, basically, and you can't control the youth quake because it's a spontaneous thing. And the thing about the rave thing was the technology hadn't matured enough like it has today. So you still had to essentially hack the system to find out where the rave was. It wasn't a Facebook thing to follow, or you didn't. It wasn't. Everything today is just given to you. You're like, people are so sick of it because everything's given to you. It's like the old adage, if you was trying to promote your stuff, you don't say it 5 times because people get sick by the 3rd time, so you say it twice. But today they say it 100 times and you just can't hear it because there's so much noise.
There's so much of it.
It's but
so where were you? Were you in London then? What
I come from London. That's right. I was born in London, so southwest, Greater London, Twickenham is where I come from, where the rugby is. And my mate was listening to the music in '88. But he was just buying records in a record shop, and he was working in the city, so he was buying the imports. And he'd make me and my other friend just make mixtapes, not mixes, just tapes with music on. And so he'd be giving me these acid house tapes, and I'm like, oh, that's kind of interesting. Oh, I like that. And I used to work in a what do you call it? An amusement arcade, not amusement arcade, a fruit machine place in Hounslow on High Street. It was a horrible place. I was encouraged to make the high spenders cups of tea to keep them in there. It's a really, I mean, you know, it's like, I was 18, you know what I'm saying? It was one of my first jobs, but no. I mean, I used to play the tapes on the system. When they'd go out in the evening, I'd play the tapes on the system. So in the evening, we'd had Acid House playing in Hounslow. But it was no rave. No one knew what it was. I was just playing the music that my friend had given me. But by the time 89, my mate was working on, he had a work experience at the BBC, and someone gave him a flyer. And we're like, oh, let's go. He's like, let's go to this thing. It's Acid House, you know? So we went to the Acid House and we did what people do in the Acid House. Yeah. And that was May Day 1989. Well, rest is history.
Well, what was it like? What was the event?
It's actually just, you know what? It was so different to what people think Acid House is today, because Acid House today has been commoditized down to a strict set of tools. But back then, everything was Acid House. You had all the Balearic beats, you had the new beat, you had your Chicago house, which was the real Acid House, which is what people say is Acid House today, which it was, because that was the stuff with the predominant 303s.
Yeah.
But people were making music with just filters. It didn't have to be a 303. It wasn't, like I say, it wasn't so strict that this isn't Acid House. It was just, as long as it squawked and it had a 4/4, people loved it. And some of those tracks have been long forgotten. There's some great tracks. And I'll tell you, people, even the DJs were playing stuff like a Yellow Magic Orchestra. Firecracker. They play that because you can mix that in. This is the right speed. And it's the right... Yeah, but it wasn't. But it's kind of kind of disco, electronic disco. But it fit. It fit with everything else. And that's what it was. It was almost like... What was the other one that was really good? That the Phantom, Renegade Hardware. Is it Renegade? No, Renegade Soundwave. No, you have to look that up. It's such a good tune, but it's not typical. It fit. That's the sort of the tunes that they were playing. It was, you know, and people would say it was Acid House because it was all one thing together, because no one really knew what it was. Now, we went to this party and it was so different to us, so different that the difference was novel itself. But
different how?
Well, everyone was turned on. Basically, that's the truth. And you go into a pub today or any club, everyone's drinking. Everyone's turned on to booze, but there's no one's drinking booze, none. Yeah, and everyone's high on something, whether it's a joint, some upper or down or whatever. Everyone's on something in '89, and everyone. The thing what people would say to you, they come, "What you on?" I'm out my box, and all this shit. And they'd be like, "What you on? What you on?" You know, most people were on ecstasy, proper ecstasy and stuff like that. But it was kind of hedonist. And you know, those days don't last forever. I mean, for some people they do, and some people they don't. But most sensible people just have a laugh and walk away and carry on with their lives. But some of us got struck by the music, and the music stuck with us. And for me, and I was really kind of dumb because I had no money, I didn't have a job, and had so many opportunities. I could be buying all this cheap gear, and I just never did at the right time. And I ended up getting the gear, but
but not in 1989 when it was.
No, it was a long time.
Cheapest.
But I got into DJing. That's what I got into. I got into the music. I didn't, you know. The way, if I was to blow my own trumpet and say I've got a talent, it's actually beat mixing. Actually pretty good at that. If I practice, I can do 3 decks. If I don't practice, I can do 2 decks. It's got to have to be the right records and selection, but it's the reality. And I learned that very early on, that I could just slam records to go. I saw people mixing, they take 5 minutes just to do this 4-bar mix. I'm like, what the fuck? Just throw them together. Don't matter if it clangs a bit, just fix it. And, you know, I did never one for actually touching the platter. It's always with the pitch control. So it's like the old disco style of mixing. But someone told me that I was fluent once. What do you mean fluent? Oh, you just, look at you. The reality is anyone can get a fucking 10-second mix, but can you fix it live when it starts clanging? Yeah. Or you're going to train wreck. And of course, I trained my first fucking gig. No one prepared me for the adrenaline, right? So I was like, I had this gig and I'm like, yeah, I'm going to play all these records. And I've been practicing. Got on stage and my ability went out the window because, you know, the adrenaline. But, so, you know, every mix was a clang. And sometimes you'll have situations where life gets in the way and we're only people or you know, the club system is messing about because I mean, I've had this many places, even in so-called good clubs, where the sound engineer doesn't understand that you shouldn't put the monitor on the same platform as the turntable. CDJ, no problem with CD, but a turntable, it's like, so as soon as you turn that one up, it starts humming. So you can't get it loud enough. And the people from my generation who spent 3 years in their bedrooms learning how to do it properly.
Because you had to.
Because you had no choice. You had no choice. But you wanted to. This is the thing. You wanted to be better than the other DJs. I mean, today, being better than the other DJs is having the looks and jumping up and down and shaking your booty better than the last guy. It's ridiculous. It's not ridiculous. I see what it is. It's just a shame, I think, because it's what I see is my art form has been destroyed.
I feel like I'm sure I may be naive of me, but I'm like, this is still a thing, but I get what you're saying as a general. There is now all this added baggage, all of this other visible DJing.
Yeah, exactly.
Especially also because I've seen.
You also see some fat old git with a bunch of records and a bad back.
Well, quite often, but yeah, it's the fact that on Instagram, what translates to like Instagram is just the highest point of a 4-hour set, and then I've seen other people describe how it's like you need to appreciate that doesn't represent the 4 hours that we're building to get there, because people have unrealistic expectations.
I think there's room for it all, really, but the trouble is when we're looking on social media and you look on your phone, that's all you're seeing is the trashy lowest common denominator stuff. There is good DJs out there. You gotta know where they are. Look to Detroit. There's a lot of good DJs coming from Detroit. Really good DJs.
What were your like? So you were a DJ. You were not like a gear person, and you foolishly did not invest the money you probably didn't have in 1989 in gear. So where does like gear enter the picture for you?
Well, first thing was Amiga. Once I had an Amiga, then I kind of got into that, and I got really into that hardcore. But I met a guy, and he had invited me over to his house, and he had a little setup. He had an Atari ST with Cubase, 2 SH101s, a 202, and an Akai S950, and
Dream.
A compressor, I think, just to do his bass. He said it was for his bass drum. But that was the first time I really saw that sort of stuff, and I didn't really know what it was, and he was like, "Oh well, look, move that thing," and he's pointing me to the cutoff fader, the cutoff, for the filter on the 101, and that's the first time I'd really done something like that. I can remember my first cutoff sweep, right? I really can. I mean, because it was like, oh shit, that's acid. I got to have one of those. And I was looked on Loot. Loot was the place to buy stuff, which was like the marketplace, the Facebook marketplace of old and yore. It was a paper you bought in London called Loot. And I looked in there and it's like, they had loads. There was loads of them. 120 quid. Some guy in Waterloo. And I was in Twickenham. So Waterloo to Twickenham, that's the same train line. That's just more closer to the city. Went up to meet the guy. He's like, yeah, it's got the knob's broken. It was able to fix it. It wasn't difficult. It was just like a broken fucking bit of plastic. So I glued it back together. Took it home, and I had an SH101, and I was like, I played with it. And then what? I mean, I did play with it a lot. Let's face it, I played with it a lot. But I had this Amiga, but I didn't have any way of synchronizing it. I borrowed a sync box from a mate so I could just clock it. So I could just do this rudimentary clocking. So, but it was only borrowed, and he needed it back for his shit at home. So what I used to do would be, I would just set up a sound, close the filter, sample it into the Amiga, open the filter a little bit, sample it into the Amiga, and then I'd have 8 samples. I'd load them into the tracker, then I could do an open close sweep onto my pattern just by, if you've ever used a tracker, you can instead of changing the notes, you can change the instrument. So I just changed the sample to the next sample and back. So I could make acid modules that sounded quite authentic because, I was making my own samples, but that was the only way I was using it. And I'd used it like that. And this is around this time I met my wife of today. And so we've been together like 30 years. And we ended up coming to Sweden, and I brought this thing with me to Sweden. I didn't have the synchronization box, and all I was doing was using it with the Amiga. And so when I went back, I'm like, oh, damn, look at the market. These things, people are paying 350 quid for these things now. I mean, it's like 200 quid on top of the 150 quid I was like, so I put it into loot. Some guy came around, some crazy German who probably remembers me because I never remember anyone I said it to, but they seem to remember me. Anyway, he came round and he was waggling all the filters really hardcore, and I was like, I was getting a bit afraid that he was just not going to buy it. He was an extreme tire kicker. I mean, he was like giving them drop kicks, you know. And he's like, yeah, I'll take it. Counted out the money, give it to me, went away. And I was like, yeah, I got this money, you know. It's not a good story. It doesn't end well. I went and bought a DAT player.
Okay.
Because we were doing these DJ sets and we wanted to record the sets. So I bought a DAT player. Well, why didn't I just buy a tape deck? Do you know what I'm saying? I was like, why did I have to have a DAT? Well, yeah, it was the DAT. It was the future.
It was the thing of the time.
It was. Like the having a DAT was 90s? Pretty cool, right? I've still got some of the DATs, actually, but I don't know whether... We haven't got the DAT player. It was a long time till I actually started getting to... Actually, I didn't really get into gear until I was in Sweden, if I'm completely honest. There's a really big synth scene here. Well, I came to Sweden in 97, did a bunch of DJing, and was involved with the Copenhagen drum and bass scene for a few years, around 2000. We had a little internet streaming station, and then we had a little bunch of friends from Malmo and Helsingborg and Copenhagen that all kind of knew each other. It was a little friendly scene, and we'd all sort of play for each other, and we'd all play on the radio. And so it was kind of, we weren't getting lots of listeners, but it was just a little community of our own people. Yeah. It didn't matter that we hadn't, you know, it was nice, good days, and kind of productive time. And we were using just Logic, Logic on a PC, and writing tracks completely in the box. I still had the sampler then. So what we would do is we would take sounds and load them. And I say we, because me and my friend Trolls, we were making this drum and bass. And we'd take these samples from and load them like a Juno sample. You could just download a Juno sample or something and load it into the EMU, then overgain it by like 22 decibels or something. It doesn't clip. It does this weird mathematical compression. So it just totally smashes the waveform. But the trick here is then you take that wave and you load it into the Z-plane filter, and then you bind the available controllers to a controller, and then you play bass notes, and then you waggle the controller while it's going. And you've got that quintessential drum and bass sound, because that's what they were doing. They were just smashing things and then filtering them down to get these massive tones, especially like people like Dillinger. He would be like the extreme one for doing it, but he was doing that sort of stuff extremely. But I mean, I think it's just about creating energy in the bass that you can still control, and it's not unwieldy. It's just fat as fuck. I think the best thing to do, I think it's the best thing if you want to become a producer, and I'm not talking about a shortcut. But if you want to actually learn how to do stuff, learn how to make drum and bass, because it is probably the hardest genre, because it's all technical. So if you learn how to do technical, then you can be lazy and just make good tracks easy, because you know where you can and can't go to a certain degree. I learned a lot doing drum and bass, more than I learned with any other genre.
Do you mean because it's so much work to make it sound coherent and well produced and big? And
the scene I was part of, we like, I mean, it's still there, the Dogs on Acid forum. And there was a thing on there called The Grid, and this was a producer's hangout where people would, and there's still a lot of stuff, all that information I think is still there, but it was quite current, and people would discuss techniques about snares and aim and breaks and bass lines and all these things. But it's a wealth of actual knowledge that people have done, just figured it out how to do this. But it was more about, with drum and bass, it's more about playing Tetris with the frequencies. Fill everything, but fill it with something. Do you know what I mean? There's a real art to it, because how do you get a sub with a kick? Well, you can, but sometimes the kick is a perceived kick rather than actual.
Yeah, I see what you mean.
Know, and like people talk about, oh, well, you can sidechain it. Well, you can just manually automate the fader. Simple. You can, you don't have to do all these elaborate stuff. You can just automate. Because what does a compressor really do? What's the compressor's job? It's just controlling the fader. It's just turning it up and down. Well, you can do that with automation, and you can do it really precisely. There's a lot of things, and a lot of stuff is, got to make sure you're not putting low end where they shouldn't be. Make sure, just get rid of it.
Yeah.
And then you can fit all these things in that you want, because I think that's the number one problem. People are like, how do I get a big bottom end? Well, cut it and then compress it. If you compress it without cutting it, it's just a mess. It's too much. Yeah, I kind of got tired of it. It's way too much work making drum and bass. You make a track and you spend a week on the mix down. Well, you don't, but you have to. If you want to make it competitive, you have to. And you're like, I can have a go, another go. Yeah, that's the danger of recall. Fuck recall. I just want to write a track in a session and fucking move on. Because I've spent weeks on tracks. Fuck that shit. I've done it.
Yeah, like Roland, like doing acid jams, your like acid booth at Superbooth is the absolute sort of diametric opposite to that.
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of my influence with that kind of stuff comes from my bandmate Henke. He's also my best friend. Hello, Henke, if you're listening. Yeah, fuck you, man. You asshole. But no, I was really into drum and bass and all the control. And he comes from well, he's a noise artist and does music concrete and all those other associated things, avant-garde. I don't know if there's a whole genre for what he does, but he's an experimentalist, basically. And I was essentially, to come from drum bass, I'm a control freak. And we knew each other for a long time. And then I moved into they had a studio, a collective. And so I was asked if I wanted to take a room there. And I had the room next to him. So, I mean, I already knew all the guys at the studio, but then we spent a lot more time together. Like, hey, do you want to jam one day? I'm like, yeah, come on, and let's mess about. And I had the Octa track and he had some 606 and some other bits and bobs. I don't remember. We were doing this jam and it was like, whoa, what the fuck? There's something going on here. You know, it's like we were gelling, you know, like when you're communicating with each other through the instruments. And so we're talking through the boxes in a kind of interesting way because what it evolved into was my control elements meeting his free, you know, his freeness of being totally free, and then we're meeting somewhere in the middle. So we have elements of control, but we also have elements of freedom. So we don't track anything anymore. We do everything as live jams, but I tend to try and mix it as we go on the fly. So I take care of the mix side of things, and then the details of like the post-production and all that stuff I'll take care of. But the actual recording of the music isn't done in that step fashion anymore. We'll make it in the same way that you would do it with like VSTs. We'll create it all first, but then we'll set up a bunch of mute groups on the mixer and things like that, and we'll have like a counterpoint and some progression in the drums or some things to keep it less, you know, otherwise it's just muting tracks. You don't want to be muting loops because that's boring. But, you know, we also want to control some of the synthesizers sometimes. I mean, you don't always want to hit the filter on the 303. Sometimes you do. Sometimes it's nice just to roll off the filter and roll out the resonance. It gets really fat and bassy and just rips. And you can just leave it there and it'll just be a nice bubbly bass line. But sometimes you want to tweak it. I mean, you know, I get tired of anything if it's all the same thing at the same time. So I try to sometimes not use the 303 in the traditional way, or try to use it differently, or use it as a controller for the 101. Or, you know,
I remember like at a festival hearing a track. I wish I knew what this was, but it was a romantic 303.
Oh, it's probably C-Fax, wasn't it? It's probably C-Fax.
Well, I don't think it was. I know his music.
But I mean, he makes those kind of quirky.
He does.
Things,
Yeah. He's absolutely the closest that you can get. But I remember I was like dancing with my mate. I was like, this is like a sort of love letter, love song, but it's a 303. And, you know, I was like, it's interesting to hear this different styles.
I mean, that's the thing. Sometimes you hear a 303 and it's like you're hearing it all again fresh because it's something captivating about certain ways those patterns line up. I don't know what it is. I remember hearing that. Oh, it's a really cheesy track. Remember, what were the guys? The White Room, KLF. They did a bunch of stuff before they went too mental, but they did this White Room album, and it was all sort of cheesy pop versions of stuff they'd done a decade before. I mean, people didn't realize, but they threw all those lyrics on. But the original music was really good, but this was overproduced and over-popified. And they have that one track, What Time Is Love, which they've totally turned a really good track into a really shit cheesy pop track. They have, but there's one point in that cheesy pop track where they drop this 303 line and that squeal's like, motherfucker. It's like, oh my God. It's like, just get the rest of the shit out of there, because it's one of those acid lines you're like, oh, I wish I programmed that. It's really good. It's haunting.
Okay.
It's a haunting piece of electronica dance music. It's so good.
I can credit you also with turning me on to one of the most haunting electro tunes that I ever heard, which is ERP's Vox Automaton.
That guy.
Oh my God.
I've got loads of his stuff. I'm a terrible DJ for remembering what's what. But every time I see his stuff, I'll pick it up if I can, because it's. I
remember you put that on like a Facebook stream, and I was like,
yeah,
oh, what is that? What is this record? And you're like,
yeah, that was a.
What sort of? You were all like,
I was buying a lot of records then. It was all that stuff because we have a distribution deal with Clone, so I would buy all my records from Clone just to keep it in the family. Like, why buy it somewhere else when And so they're really big on electro. So that I was just like, oh my God, just buy all this. I just buy what I listened to it and to buy what I liked. It's a good thing to spend money on because records are real. You get to keep them, right? You can play them, and they're like time machines. They really are. I mean, you hear a record you haven't heard in 20 years. It'll take you right back to where you heard it, and you'll smell the smells for a brief moment, just a reverie of like. Magic, this memory, it spurs this memory, and you get more than just I remember where I was. You get a little taste of everything. It's like at least I do. Not every time I hear a record, but sometimes some records will do that to me. Why am I still involved in music? I mean, from a very early age, I was exposed to it, and it's just something that affects me. And I get frustrated when I haven't got any inspiration for writing music, because I always want to write music, but it doesn't work like that. You can always appreciate. I find
music. You just have to start, right? I mean, with gear like behind you just pick it up and move your hands and see what comes out.
I think you have to press the record button before you do anything, because if you get something and you try and record it, and you break the moment. That's very
true.
Easy.
That's true.
And there's that. What's the other tip? Is like, if you want to know if your track's good, play it to your mate while you're both in the room. You'll know before he even hears it if it's good or not.
Oh, if you're embarrassed.
Well, no, because it's too easy to love your own music. But when you hear something, you have a fresh set of ears listening to it for the first time. You are exposed, naked, and vulnerable, and you hear it for what it is for the first time.
Because you know someone's listening to it.
But it is because it's too easy to love your own music. So you've got to kill your darling, as they say. I find if you are not inspired, you should do, and you've got studio time, you should do the utility stuff, the boring shit. Sort out the cables, chop the samples, load up the machines, so that when you do have the proper urge, actually by doing that, probably give you the urge to do it sometimes,
Because you remove the friction of like, oh fuck, my sampler's not plugged in, or else isn't working, or
fucking easy
MIDI
to be,
not set up.
It's too easy to be lazy when you're the boss, right? So you've got to be disciplined, and if you don't truly feel any inspiration, and it does come in waves. Because a lot of times the best tracks most people write, they don't really know how they wrote them. They just channeled something, and everything was right moment, right day. And then they got a great track, and sometimes you don't know it's a great track until like a week or two later, and then you hear it again. You're like, oh, it's best to just keep your doors open, isn't it? Try and see.
No one can sit down and say, today I will write my masterpiece.
No, well, some people can, but whether it is or not is a different matter, isn't it? They try to.
You can really go off some people, can't you?
Yeah, but there are some people that actually truly have a talent, true talent. And you can be a little bit jealous of these guys, but it's like you're never going to be the toughest kid in the school, so get over it. There's always going to be someone around the corner waiting to smack you down. So it's the same.
You also,
everywhere.
you may not be the toughest in school, but you still are unique, and you will have your own little unique spin on something, no matter what.
The truth of the matter is, why are you here? When it comes down to music, are you here for the glamour? Well, then it's going to run out. It's going to run out in a year. If you're truly into the music, you're here for life. Unfortunately.
Yeah. If I could say anything, it's that, do you really love it? Do you really love it? Because ultimately, if you're making music to try and impress other people, that cannot be the yardstick of whether something's good or not.
Well, that's cookie cutter, isn't it? It's cookie cutter.
Yeah.
This is the thing. You see a lot of these people, these artists, they get popular with a track. And then they'll make 100 tracks of the same track, a remix of that same thing, because they get into this mold. Self-inflicted cage. Yeah. They put themselves in a cage because they know it works, but it gets boring as fuck. I mean, this is the best musicians are able to evolve and keep hold of that hype, whatever they get. If you're a talented musician, you're going to shine through. The passionate people, they're going to be there regardless of whether they're getting famous or they're making money, because that's what they do. This is, what else do we do in this planet weird existence? Well, I mean, let's not get philosophical, but if you're religious, then you have an answer. If you're not religious, then you don't. And most people in the modern age believe in science. And because science gives us technology, and technology gives us transistors, and they make bass lines. But if you ask a conspiracy theory, I've seen conspiracy theories about transistors coming from crashed Roswell shit. So maybe all that stuff in the 90s about the 303s take us to the alien stuff was actually true. Who knows? Maybe we were being maybe those
programmed.
Well, that was the whole point. When you were programming, you didn't know what you were doing, so you were really just sending them cryptic messages. They were trying to talk to us. No one knew. There's people who believe shit like that, though, mate. We've got to be careful what you say, because they think you're serious.
Ultimately, if we're beaming out...
Disclaimer, we're just having a laugh.
The radio waves from 1988 still propagating out into space,
stop you there? I just got to say, I don't do modules anymore, really, but I have to say that radio music, Tom's radio music, is such a great little module.
It's good, isn't it? Yeah,
I've had so much fun with that, with a delay.
What do you put in it?
I took all his down his whole bank of all these radio.
I love his banks as well. He's got some.
I just loaded the whole thing. It's got all these weird chanting stuff on it, and a load of just like hypnosis weird shit, and then you just trigger shit.
You are going deeper.
Yes. But so good. I'm so lucky to we're so lucky to have all that stuff today.
We are.
Actually, this reminds me of a message I have got to ask you a question. It's very fundamental. If you have a bacon sandwich.
Yeah.
Ketchup or brown sauce?
Personally, ketchup.
Oh, damn. Okay, never mind.
Do you know what? I was saying to my wife the other day, I might get a bottle of brown sauce because someone was around and asked for it, but on sausages. But
it's a little bit of fun. It was one Super Booth morning. I was sitting in the tent and I was a bit lagging from the day before, and Simon came in with this hamper of bacon sandwiches, which he had made for all of us lot. And he's like, do you want some ketchup? Nah, give me some brown sauce. He's like, I haven't got any brown sauce. And he got ketchup. I said, what do you mean you haven't got any brown sauce? A bacon sandwich. But brown sauce, mate, it's HP sauce, isn't it? It's from London. But
it's literally got Houses of Parliament on it.
Right. But the Northerners love it.
I do like it.
They fucking love it.
Because it's it's like
well, this is the thing. So we went up to Alan at AJH. And he's talking to a customer. He's like, what do you want? I said, no, we'll wait for you, mate. Wait for you. I've got a question for you.
It's important.
So, of course, I knew he was going to say brown sauce. So I just knew it. That's why I was like, hey, Simon, look, check this out. Come here. Alan, bacon sandwich, ketchup or brown sauce? Or maybe I even said, what sauce? Rather than giving him a choice. Just, brown sauce. What? Honestly, the Super Booth for me is the highlight of my year. It's the highlight of my working year, because I get to see all these people I've known for close to a decade or more once a year. Yes. And it's not just one or two people. It's a whole trove of people.
It's everyone.
And I mean, since like the original, when Super Booth became I think it was its first time it became its own thing.
The Funk House.
Yeah, and it was such a nice venue, but that was when my eyes were opened, because that was the year that I had new Eurorack modules, and I had the 303 prototype. I'd got into modules right before I Dream of Wires. I got when I joined the Muff Wigglers. What's the correct name for it now? Mod Wiggler.
Mod Wiggler.
I owe a lot of my business to Mike. That's what I'll say. I wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for Mike. I wouldn't, mate, because before I was doing the 303 stuff, I was doing modules, and a lot of people know I was doing that, but a lot of people don't know that. I went to Muffwig. I'd just been made redundant my previous job. All I had was this module, and I said to Mike, "It's all right if I post, see if anyone wants to buy it." And he's like, "Yeah, do it." And every time I spoke to him, he was always trying to encourage me to use the resources. Do it. Do you want a forum? It's like, oh no, I don't want a forum, because they had all these manufacturer forums, and I didn't want that because I didn't feel like I was big enough at the time to warrant anything like that, and I just wanted to try and see what's up here. Maybe I'll make a few bucks before my next job. And so I made this kind of, not a terrible module, but my reference was I had a Dopfra module, the Dark Energy. And the actual module version of that isn't at modular levels. But that's the only module I had, and that was my reference. So I made a module based on the levels of that, and it wasn't loud enough, basically. And it's just shit you learn later, and didn't have reverse power protection and crappy stuff. But what it was a 303 oscillator, and it was just the sawtooth and the square wave, but done properly. Because I'd come up DIY stuff through Zoxbox. I was one of the Zoxbox moderators 20 years ago. And the thing about this oscillator was the square wave was on the 303 is very unique. It's kind of like it's got a weird kink in it's not a true square wave. It kind of has a bump. So it has that sort of raspy tone, and the bump moves with the frequency. And this is why the 303 sound had this particular, if you listen to the bass, the square wave rather, on a 303, and it's the same on the System 101 or the System 100, the old keyboard. It's the same. I think it's almost the same circuit as the bass. So it's basically using this transistor, but it's a sawtooth going and being clipped by a transistor, basically. But it's just done it's kind of like one of these kind of novelty hacks, if you like. So, but what it means is that you don't get a nice, true scientific square wave. You get a square wave that changes shape with frequency. Not too much that it can't be used as an instrument, because you're saving money, but it gives it the character, and it has this lovely character. No one had this. Everyone had boring square waves. There was no module scene. I was like, oh yeah, I've been doing this for a couple of years. I've been doing it over a decade now. It's crazy. It's crazy where it went. Actually, one of my friends, he's like, you don't see it because I don't see it because it's every day, but he sees it because I don't see him enough. And then he's like, oh, look at you now. You're not riding that bicycle anymore, are you?
And so do you actually make a living selling kits? Is that your job?
This is my job. This is my full-time job for over a decade. This is what I've been doing. DINSYNC, is it? Yeah. We sell
part of me is like, is it not remarkable that there is enough of a market for like what is quite niche, like the niche aspect of like kit building is like, is it more commonplace than I realized?
I think our real boom was COVID, because we were in a hobby market. So people like to build those stuff, regardless of what they're building. People like to build stuff. People like, so that's why there's a 3D printer scene, or there's a DIY scene for anything at all. And anyone can do it, but the trouble is what happened. You've got to learn something about troubleshooting so that you can fix it when something goes wrong. There's always the internet for that. That can always help you. There's always going to be someone who's had that same problem before you. If with the right search terms, you can get some of the answers. Just don't use any AI for searching. No, it's AI it will hallucinate. It will just hallucinate one detail, and you'll go down a rabbit hole for a day, and you'll be like, what the fuck? Why didn't that work? Well, because you didn't ask it from. You asked it from they trip. Those things, they trip. They do. They trip out. We actually had a discussion with one guy, a really nice guy. If he heard this, he would probably know who I was talking about, so I won't say his name. But it was actually a really nice artist guy, and he'd asked the Chat GPT early version for how to do some 303 maintenance and mods and stuff, and then he posted it up, and we were like all shouting at him, take that down, because everyone's going to start believing it's all wrong. It's all wrong. And he was like, oh, what are you guys gatekeepers of the scene? No, the fucking shit's tripping out, man. He's like literally completely wrong information that would break your shit or not work at all. And the only people who know how to do that are the people that know how it works, because it sounded, actually, if you read it, it sounded coherent. It actually sounded like something you could do, no problem. Because that's the trouble with the AI. It's scary.
AI writing as well. Yeah, it is a really good bullshitter.
Yes.
On a surface level, if you're not really paying attention, it writes well, it writes coherently, but until you really actually think about what it's saying, you're like,
it's
you haven't really said anything. Like, you haven't said anything substantive. You've said florid language.
It's scary.
That sounds like writing.
It's scary as fuck, mate.
I want to ask you about like Roland gear, like, and because we have in your brain, you understand back to front, like how a 101, an 808, 909, and a 303 work. I'm curious
Pretty
about
much.
like
sometimes. Yeah, I've got a good knowledge of it.
One of the key things is filters. Like, how there were a number of Roland filters, and a lot of the filters in these machines, like the Jupiter 8, the Juno 60, Juno 106, and the 101,
it's all the same.
They all use the IR 3109.
Yeah,
but they sound different.
Yeah, because they drive it differently. It's the voltage rates. Like if you look at the 202 and the 101, apart from the modulators, the circuits are identical, but they're running on different power rails, and the layout's different, so they sound different. It's just
the power. Do you mean literally like it's 15 volt versus 12 volt, and that makes it sound different?
I don't remember offhand, but if you look up the service notes, you'll notice that all the references are different. It's the same circuit, but they're all different. It's just basically they're using different levels for probably to do with to save battery for the sequencer on the 202 because it was a little bit more in depth. The thing about the 202 is it's really funny. Well, it's not funny if you've got one, but if you actually write real music in it, the way Roland intended, when you're writing music with bars, every time we add a bar, little pattern bar, not like selectable patterns on a 303, but literally bars in the music. So you could see I was on bar number 4 or bar number 6. Every time we add a new bar, it slows down a little bit, just a little bit, not much, just a little bit. But this is a little bit of a problem because every bar you add, it slows down a little bit. So, and I'm not talking about playback. Playback's fine. I'm talking about it feels all this latency. The latency in the sequencer, it feels janky as fuck. You're like, what the fuck? Did I press it? Did I press it?
Yeah.
But it beeps. It's really, the thing about a 202, it is basically an MC4 shoehorned into a synth box. It really is. It's awful, but it's great as well. I mean, if you actually learn the sequencer, it's really good because it's the same sequencer that's in the 303. It's just not pattern based. It's the same way of working. The 303 is a separation of time, velocity, and
completely
and length,
independent. I want to you've reminded me of a question I wanted to ask you. You of all people, I have a pet theory about this. Do you think that Tadao Kikumoto knew what the 303 was sonically capable of? Do you think that the designers intended, like, for the sounds that it was capable of to happen, or do you think they were as surprised as everyone else?
No, I think they just used existing technology they had in their R&D.
And there was no more thought of because they presumably because as a designer, isn't your job also to define the ranges of a knob? To say this knob could go up to 12, but we'll stop it at 10.
No, the thing about Roland, it's always been about reusing the parts. So if you look at the service notes of all their stuff over the decades, not everything's the same, of course, but they have generations of parts that they make.
Yeah,
and they've stuck to that. And designs also. So now they're doing IRA and they're doing iterations of IRA or the next digital thing because they're all digital now, but they're still doing the same practices that they did with the analog gear. They just reuse what they have. Now, they didn't design the 303 for any specific purpose except, this is what I've been told, except for retooling the 606 molds.
So the 606 came first.
Yes, the 606 was very successful.
Pro Forma range, isn't it?
But,
Is it real name?
Yeah, Promart. It's Pro. Yeah, no, that's that P-Bus stuff. I don't know. There's some lot of weird nomenclature. I don't remember.
There's the 303 and the 606. There's a name for the range that you never hear. It's like
because it's ridiculous. It's
Pro Forma or something like that.
Anyway,
but so the 303 is a just to use 606 molds.
Yeah, and this is what I was told, and it's actually true because if you look at the 303 service notes, you can see where they've cut and pasted the 606 stuff and they forgot to remove some of it. So there's old remnants of the 606 because they were using hand-drawn schematics, and they forgot to remove some. Well, why was that 606 stuff there that is actually part of the 606? Why is that in the service notes? You would only notice it if you knew the circuits. You looked at them, you're like, what's that doing there? The rumor I heard, which came from someone in the industry, it doesn't mean it's true, but was that they retooled basically the 606 cases and squeezed the 303 in it.
If you look at the ad, the one that there is an ad somewhere that's like the Pro Form or Prosumer range or whatever they called it, Pro Form. They said, and there will be more. They said there'll be more, and there obviously never was because they obviously bombed.
The 202 is part of it, though. If you look at the 202,
is it?
Well, I think it is because if you look at it, even the case has some similarities in the design. It's been designed by the same people. When I say, I'm not talking about the engineers who made the circuits. I'm talking about the industrial design people, the same people. Because you can see it. You can see it throughout that. I think that was a really good era for them, actually. The aesthetic was really good in that era.
I agree wholeheartedly. I mean, I think, I just see the 202 and I think of the 101 and that. Yeah, I talked to you about your, the case.
Yeah.
I love, it's a shame that there isn't, is there a 3D printer big enough to print a 101
sure there is.
case?
Yes, there is.
Is that like that weird steppy thing?
Who wants to do that though? There is massive printers. You can get massive 3D printers. Yes, you could if you pay for it. But why? You'd be able to get a second-hand case for less money.
Maybe I've got an eBay search for like dead on DOA, not dog on acid.
Well, if anyone out there,
101.
If anyone out there's got a dead 101, Alex here has got a re 101 kit. He still hasn't built because he's lazy. Because he's lazy. But he will build it.
Busy.
If you get him a case, he's got no excuse, has he?
Is it true? Like the 808 uses broken transistors?
Bullshit.
Is that's just one of those stories that sounds too good?
It's good market. It's good market. Even the boss got round and said it. There is some truth to the reality of this failed transistor, but there was no magic in this failed transistor. You could just buy 100 of them and pick one to ear, and it would sound like the failed transistor. Or, as Roland did through the production cycle, use a 945. Anyone who's a synth DIY guy knows what a 945 is. It's just basically a transistor.
945.
It's a transistor.
But what is specific? What?
There's nothing magic. This is the thing. If you look on our motherboard, the Reed 808 motherboard, right next to the noise transistor, there's a little arrow, and it says "lol magic nope." hashtag lol magic nope, because it's bullshit, and they've been regurgitating bullshit because they like to say that this transistor ran out, and that's why they stopped making the 808. That's the story, that they couldn't make the 808 because of this transistor. If you're an engineer, a service engineer, you know that's bullshit, because you look in the service documentation, they used the 2SC 945 instead of this rare transistor through the production cycle. And we're still using them today. We can still buy them today. It's nonsense. It's nonsense.
But I suppose then the question is, are there any magic parts?
Yes.
You talk about the 303 as well. You've got like a magic thing in the 303, isn't there? Like you've got like a magic option. What are the like?
No, there's no magic option. There's no magic. The reality is.
I'm sorry, I was looking for some magic on this.
No, it's on. It's at the end. We were just making fun of myths, because there's no magic involved at all. It's science. If it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. And the reality is, sometimes the legend sounds better than the reality. So they regurgitate the legends. And of course, if it sells units, that's what they do.
You obviously get people who would listen to like a Re 303 and be like, well, I distinctly remember hearing a 303 back in 1989 and it sounded different to this. Like,
it probably did. And your memory of it. And, what you got to do is you've got to know better. You just got to know. If you know better, the reason our stuff, and without being arrogant about why it sounds better than everyone else's clones, is because we did it all properly. That's all. They cut corners to save money, especially when you're talking about companies that need to make a bottom line. We're making DIY kits. We haven't got to worry about that. People buy their own parts and build it themselves.
Yeah.
Why would you want to build? I mean, we all came from the Zoxbox scene, all the people involved with the stuff I do. And we did it all in these kind of other ways. And the Zoxbox was what opened my eyes and a lot of my friends' eyes to making machines. But then once you've done them all, then what's the next thing? Well, then let's do it all exactly as it was. Let's make replicas. And that was our slogan. It's not a clone, it's not a clone, it's a replica. Now everyone is talking about clones and replicas, especially with Boehringer, But it's true.
What is your opinion of what is your opinion of them?
I don't have one. They'll sue me
for having an opinion.
Isn't that what they do? I mean, why poke the bear? There's no point. I've got nothing to do with them. Yeah. It's not even my market. They're making stuff for a certain market. We're making stuff for audio professionals. That's all. That's the difference. The people who buy our stuff buy it because they want to have the OG.
The thing.
Well, you can't. You get the OG or you get our thing, and there's very little difference because we even clone the CPUs. No one else has done that. We me and my mate Philippe, we got a guy, a local friend of mine, Mark. He had this broken up 808, and I said, look, can we take the CPU out of it? And that's just taking the CPU out of anything like that has got a risk. You could just damage it. A leg could fall off. It's broken. You can't.
I took the CPU out of my Juno 60 and it wasn't fun.
Wasn't fun, but this is an 808 CPU. No one had an 808 CPU on the shelf. I even asked contacts at Roland. So basically, I extracted the CPU and we just hope it still fucking works. And Philippe had been talking to these. He'd figured out that these MAME guys had been doing these emulations. And he'd found a thread of information about, because the only traditional way to take the code from this CPU is to decapsulate it, which basically use some acid and bring it down to the bare metal gates and scan it and extract the data that way. Because basically a mask-wrong CPU is the code written in. It's not like a firmware flash. It's literally written in hardware. But we found a thread of information about you could somehow manipulate some registers and make it dump or read itself, essentially. Yeah. And so Philippe's like, well, we can just stick it in, get this board, buy this board. He's in Portugal, I'm in Sweden. So I've got this CPU. You can't send it to Portugal because, we can't lose it, and the guy wants it back. So I get it into a little Arduino board, and I connect it up to the laptop, and we patch a load of ports to the CPU. And then at AnyDesk, he connects in, and he spends a day or two just hacking my laptop. And then we got it. We got all the code out of it. You had to do some more manipulation, but eventually we got all the code. And the next thing, at least what we thought was all the code, then we tested it on the Pixie. And the Pixie was already running 303 CPU code. The memory addressing was different. So, but luckily, Johan, who's Pixie, the guy who makes the CPU, he, in his design, incorporated a few extra ports for future proof. So we had an extra port so we could address the memory as the 808 slightly differently, patched it up and it worked. And then we had an 808 brain. This is the thing a lot of people overlook. Is why are you buying this instrument? Well, because it sounds good. Well, why does it sound good? Because it makes sound, which is not just the sound. It's also the playback. It's not just the playback either. It's also the sound. It's everything.
Certainly with the 303, right? It's like, how can you have a 303 without the sequence?
What have they been talking about? The 808 groove for years, how much groove it is. Well, now the 808 and the 303 and the 606 by extension, which we also have running the original CPU code, they think they're the original machines when they're playing back. So you're getting the original player. So you're getting that original. This is the thing about the 303. What were they trying to do? You said, I asked earlier, I think they were trying to make a bass guitar emulation, electric bass emulation, which is what they clearly stated. And the way they talk about it in the manual, it does actually sound like a bass guitar if you play it like that.
Yes, in context.
It does. It's like a cheesy bass guitar at that, like a weird cheesy 80 thing from something from the 80s. It was never supposed to be what it became.
What is that? Is that Joe Jackson tune, Stepping Out? Is that a 303?
Oh, I don't know. The first time I heard of 303, this is a really nice story, actually. One of those full circle of your life stories. When I was a kid, I used to listen to Street Sounds Electro. Mm-hmm. And that was the thing when I was at school.
Those compilations.
All these compilations, tapes and cassettes and records. Much later, I found out that one of the records I liked was Jam On It by Nucleus. And that's got a 303 line in it. I didn't know, and an 808, actually, and a Pro 1. Like all the good stuff. I loved that record. I loved it all my life. And then later on, I realized it was a 303. I'd heard it. And I was like, because I just heard it with new ears, because I'd heard it after I'd heard what a 303 was. But it was never played like a 303, like a typical acid. It was just like a little burbling little riff they have going on. Mm.
I was reminding myself just then that the first chart record, I learned this not all that long ago, that used the 303 is Rip It Up.
Oh, that's such a terrible tune. Such a
Rip It Up and Start.
I know the tune. I know that.
Sorry, I'm getting copyright strike there.
No,
that's
you're not with that voice. Not with that voice.
Sorry, thank God. At least.
No, but if we're talking about the story about Roland, I'll tell you a little bit about it. Basically, that year, 2016, they had made the 3 boutiques, the Juno, the early boutiques. There was 3 that they made, the Jupiter 8, the 106 and...
JX3P, wasn't it?
Yes, that's right. But it hadn't really made any other plans.
And they hadn't made the analog one, right?
No, it hadn't made anything. Yeah, it hadn't made anything. So I was at Super Booth. For some reason, my booth was right next to the entrance to Roland. Whether that was a coincidence or whether they were like, DINSYNC Roland, let's put him there. Whether you never know how these things work. You never know how these things work. So I'm there at the booth, and every time someone because they had like a room, Roland. They had to every time they come in and out of the room, they have to walk past my booth. And there's me and my mate Michael, and he's got this yellow jacket with these black acid-looking eyes, black sort of. It's like a ski thing, but it looks like so we're calling him Captain Acid, and he's dancing around. And we've got the back wall in the room, so we've got all the bass from the back wall. And so they're going past, and we're just like boom, boom, boom. I think we're playing Drum Doctor and 2303s, and everyone. That was the year that I decided not to do Eurorack anymore because I suddenly realised how much Eurorack there was. Even then, there was so much fucking Eurorack. But anyway, so the guys are walking past, and then one of the guys comes over, and I'm like, "Yeah, look at this," and I've got an unbuilt machine, just the circuit boards. And if you look at the original circuit and turn them over, they're all done. They weren't done with CAD; they were done by hand.
Oh yeah, you've got wiggly traces.
That's what I'm saying. We've got the same traces. We've got wiggly traces. We've got the same wiggly traces, whether it means anything or not. But I love how it looks. It looks impressive. And that's what I was saying to this guy. And this is the one guy, I think he was from France or the Belgium division. He wasn't part of the German guys. He was just there at the show with them. And I said, and he's like, "Oh, I can see it. We love it, but they want to sell to DJs now. This is the bottom line. They just want to sell units." So anyway,
you're not tooled up. Like they're not tooled up at scale to build analog gear.
No, of course not.
As you say,
if they wanted to, they could do it. They could do anything they want to do.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, we know companies do it. Companies build 303s at scale, obviously.
But anyway, I had some kits. I had these alpha kits. This is the one you've got. These are the alphas. These are the ones. The version that came before the release version, and there's not really any difference. They're
a bit warmer and better. There's some magic in it.
Yeah, exactly. The one I play on stage is an alpha, because I'm an alpha. Yeah, fuck off. Wow. No, anyway. No. So I had some of them under the towels. I said, "Here, you can have one. You have to build it yourself, though." And he's like, "Oh, really?" It's just a box of boards. There's nothing, but he was happy to get it. And he went back into the Roland booth, and we're like, "Oh, we just threw the bomb in the wasp's nest there, didn't we?" Just gave one to the Roland guy, and he went back. Next day, someone else come by, and, "Hey, you've got another one of those?" I said, "Sorry."
"Can I have your business card?"
No, they wanted another one. Someone else wanted to, because they wanted to build it. They wanted to build it for themselves. And the whole time, there was a guy walking by, and he kind of gives me a nod. He's looking at me, I'm like, "Who's this guy?" He keeps smiling. He's getting into the Roland place. And at the end of the show, he comes over. He says, "Oh, I'm the boss here. Here's my card. Drop me a line after Super Booth, and I'll put you in touch with the interface to Japan." And I was like, "Okay." And so I did. A few weeks later, I wrote to him, and he's like, "Yeah, here's the details." He wrote back. I mean, he's still around actually. But anyway, so he gives me the contact, and so I'm like, "Damn." So I think about, what do I do next? Well, what's the best thing to do is to show it to them. Try and get a meeting and show it to them. Because they'll get it. As soon as they see it, they'll get it. I won't have to explain it, they'll get it. So I write to them and I request a meeting. I get no reply from the contact. None at all. None whatsoever. And I'm like, damn, what the fuck? Not even a smidgen. So I'm like, well, fuck it. I've got this contact. He's obviously read this thing and it's just not impressed him enough. So then I have to do the pitch on email. So I wrote this really impassionate email about me and how I'd come into this through doing service stuff, and how that if, you could make the 303, but then you could make the 808 and the 606 because of all the related technology. You're basically just rehashing the same thing when you're making these other versions. And I felt like, because I'd been working with Roland, because I've been working in repair, so I've been working with the Roland service centers. So I had kind of a good relationship with them here in Sweden also. That's all gone now. They packed it all away, which is sad. They've shut down all their service stations. If you want parts now, you have to call Thomann. It's ridiculous. It's fucking ridiculous.
Oh, really?
For vintage parts. You can't buy vintage parts from... They used to have a whole network of service. It's gone. At least it's
official. This is official service, or
yeah. I used to be able to buy 303 spare parts direct from Roland. I had a relationship with them. You have to pay. You have to. They don't have everything in stock, but I bought a whole bunch of shit from them. Because if you've got the part number, you just ask them. Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Dual transistors, these rare transistors for the filters and all sorts of shit. But it's long gone. They've shut it all down. I think because it was basically, I could talk to the guy in Stockholm, and he could look in the whole global stock of Roland spares, and yeah, you have to pay a service charge, but then you would get it if they had it anywhere in Roland, you could get it. Mm. And this is another thing about this. Anyway, I'll finish the story about the pitch to Roland. So I wrote this long pitch, telling them, pour my heart out about how much I love this stuff and how much we're into it and what we could, the potential of this is. And another 3 weeks went by, and then I got a reply, which itself is a fucking achievement, right? Because we're talking about, when you say the guy said he was the interface to Japan, well, he was probably his boss, senior guy at Japan. He wasn't the boss, but this was like, and he said to me, they really appreciated what I had done. And, they basically gave me the Asian way of saying no, where it was this flower letdown, very nicely letting me down. They kind of said, and at the end of it, they said, well, we're doing something similar ourselves. They didn't say what, but this obviously was the boutique stuff that they went on to do 303 and all these other things. But because what I'd said in the pitch to them, it's very difficult for me to convey on email how much excitement I generated in the Roland camp at Superbooth this year. It's very, because he'd obviously spoken to them. They'd obviously said they had some conversations and they were excited about it. But the corporation wasn't, because
but it is fundamentally, their slogan, as you well know, isn't now but was, we design the future.
Yeah.
Well, not we design, not we chase ghosts of the past. That whole joke.
That's just fucking eating, but then shooting yourself in the foot. Why would you be stupid like that? But it's like,
but I get it. It's like I can see both sides of it. I can see that
we're not talking about Ferraris,
sense to do something new and do something different.
Do both.
But you can't. I agree with you. I agree, because I want that. I
mean,
I also want a Hydra synth.
I mean, my thing was for them really was the part of my pitch also was about creating legacy spare parts for 40-year-old customers. For customers for 40 years, we could create these parts, which I now sell, legacy spare parts. I mean, that's my business. And, I support the stuff they don't want. They don't want to support. That's what I'm saying. They've shut down all their service centers. They're not interested in this.
It doesn't make financial sense to keep.
No, it's not about fun. It's about goodwill. All those customers that you've been buying your shit for years, well, you can't look after them sometimes instead of just being this brick wall of politics. And that's what it is. It's too big for its own good, unfortunately. Like any corporation, they get stuck in the minutiae. And my understanding is they're not interested in analog at all. And that's fair. That's fair. That's a business
obvious.
decision. But that's
obvious.
fine.
Yeah.
But, there's also a reason why people build kit cars of Lotus 7s, because Lotus don't want to make Lotus 7s anymore. They can't even make them anymore themselves. This is what we're getting down to. The fundamental fact of the matter is Roland don't have anyone in-house that can do this stuff anymore. They could get them if they wanted them. No denying that, but they don't want to.
Yeah.
They don't want to. They're not interested in that. Because music instruments isn't their main business, is it? Never really has been. They're a corporation making all sorts of industrial stuff, right?
They make printers and sort of all manner of.
But they've been doing good ones for years, actually. Not chintzy shit. Proper stuff, actually. Industrial levels. I worked in a business that had one of those. It was really good. So there's no doubt that.
I think it's surely ultimately it's a business, and and weird analog synths or even very famous legendary analog synths are still a niche. It's a niche.
They make their money on the name of them through their software plugins, and that's fine. That's where they're at.
Yeah.
And that's where they're at. Yeah. And that's fine for them. And you know what? They have more expertise in that than most people, although their 303 emulations still kind of suck.
Do you mean, have you tried, you were talking about the boutique one. Do you think
it's crap. It's crap.
Doesn't sound.
I've got one. I bought one just for the sake of having one, right? To see. I bought one so I could have a new TB03. It's shit.
Oh yeah.
It's shit. I used it once or twice and put it in the box, put it on the shelf, and it just stays there. And it's like, I won't sell it because I won't get the money for it, because I bought it secondhand anyway, just because I was curious, right? I wasn't curious enough to buy one of those turd threes, but there you go.
The
turd three, the TD3, turd three. Have you checked out the domain T/TD3, or was it TD3.com? Goes to Tom Oberheim. That's weird, isn't it?
What? TD-3.com?
Yeah, do the thing. It goes to Tom Oberheim.
Is it TD-3.com?
Well, however it's spelt on the machine.
Oh, it does. TD-3.com redirects to Tom Oberheim.
That's fucking mental, isn't it? How'd that happen?
I see. Okay. Right.
Well, it's all about taking people's names at some point, wasn't it?
I see.
Someone took someone's name and then someone registered a domain.
Well, yeah. And
it's for sale, by the way.
£1,000,000.
No, you've got to give the money to Tom, though.
Oh, okay. Fair.
It's all about karma. It's all about being nice to people and loving people and not kicking them in the balls. Because you think about it, actually, people have said to me, why don't Roland come after you? Well, I think we're filling a gap that they're not interested in anymore. And I think we've always been respectful to them, not using their trademarks at all ever. And I've been really strict about people on our forums. I even had people giving me bloody death threats because I took I'm putting Roland logos on my thread. No, fuck off with that shit. That's the shit that's going to get us in trouble. We got to respect them. Now, they don't, obviously they're not happy about what we do, but we're supporting them, actually. We're supporting their customers. I have people that buy switches for their old 808s every day. Well, not every day, but you know what I'm saying.
Unquestionably championing the spirit of the devices by enabling them to be made again in the way they were. Right,
that's what I'm saying. We make accurate spare parts, so accurate that you can build the machines again. And we love the machines. And, we see them propping up everywhere. I mean, I see, it doesn't even have to be a famous artist, but if I see someone who's just jamming that thing, it gives me a glow. It gives me a glow. It's because people do stuff beyond your expectations, especially musical instruments. You can always use them in traditional ways, but then sometimes you'll get one guy he'll just, like Daniel Trobo. He bought one of my first modules. I didn't even know he was anything to do with Electron at the time, because you don't say, "Hi, I'm the guy from Electron. Can I buy a module?" You just say, "Hey, can I buy a module?" So he bought one and John Tejada bought one also. I didn't know because I think they're friends, but I didn't know who he was either at the time. So they had these modules. And it was probably my first batch of modules. And anyway, he wrote me an email one time. He's like, do you know if you patch it back on itself, it does this? I'm like, don't do that, you'll break it. And I use these other things like, who's this crazy guy? He's wow, what genius.
Yeah, he's a genius. Final few questions. What is your favourite non-Roland synth?
That's a good question. Something by DINSYNC maybe, but...
Not allowed to have DINSYNC. Is it the Pro 1 behind you?
Probably. Could be. I don't use it enough, actually, the Pro 1. I use it when it's time to use it. Do you know what I mean? It's one of those ones. I don't always reach for it. I go through these kind of affairs. I've got an FS1R there in the rack too. That's also a favourite. Because that got a channel on the APB, on the Dynasonics mixer that I came back from Superbooth with. We did some collaboration. And
did you?
Yeah, they had a little sort of show, and they had a bunch of artists, and some of the guys had artists for our stuff instead of using some boring stuff. Well, basically, long story short, I helped them for 3 days, a little bit of support, not much, but took a little bit away from my time, but at the end of the day, I traded the mix. They traded me a mixer for a 909, and the mixer was worth twice as much as the 909.
I was going to say that those are very nice mixers, those APVs.
Right. But my time's worth some money too.
Yeah, of course.
But,
So is the 909.
I genuinely appreciate what they did there, because that was something to come back with that mixer, and I've now rearranged my whole fucking studio around this mixer. Because I looked
at that and I was like,
so
I can't justify the cost. But I did just get a Venice 32, so
that's good too.
I can't complain.
That's not the that's not the Behringer one, is it?
It fucking well is not the Behringer one, mate.
Yeah,
it's PB, mate.
That's the proper one you got. Yeah, that's the proper one. That's a good mixer. Yeah.
And if I can't make a decent record with my bits of like acidy gear on that, then the problem is not the mixer.
You can make decent records. It's whether you want to make
decent record on a fucking.
It's whether you're being lazy or not.
Yes, you can just wire a coat hanger together and make a decent record.
I mean, when we were doing drum and bass with just Logic, we were writing. Me and my mate, we were writing them in a room in my house on some fucking hi-fi speakers, and then cutting them on vinyl. We had a P&D deal and everything, so it's like you don't need the gear. You don't. You just need a computer and some speakers, and we were getting deals. I mean, good luck getting a P&D deal anywhere today. I mean, that shit was lovely.
Well, it's like the laptop kids now. They're just
but I'm saying back in the day of vinyl,
same sort of thing. They're still doing it. Just a laptop and one speaker, perhaps.
That was the thing with these P&D deal. If you don't know, P&D is press and distribute, where you would give the music to the distributor. You'd have a deal. If they didn't like it, they'd kick it back. But generally, they were in the business of making records they thought they could sell. So as long as they were happy about your music, they would pay for it to be released. You wouldn't get much money. You'd get some money, you'd get a couple of records if you were lucky. But good luck. But you do it because as an artist, you were not really interested in music, making the money, because these global distribution, they'd get you gigs. You'd get gigs on the back of those records, and you'd have records, and you'd get fans, direct fans. But today you're competing with Instagram booty stuff. It's like, how can you compete with that? Yeah, but how can you compete with that? How can anyone get noticed today? I think
it's a game played on different terms for different. It's not just playing records and being good at playing records. It's also being visible and shareable.
I mean, there's guys that I know that are so much better than me DJing, and because they got all this extra knowledge, and I don't have that. I just my brain cells went to other things through the course of my life, learning other stuff. And I didn't really have. It was a long time I didn't have enough money to buy records. I'd be playing my mates' records, just learning that way. There was times that I lost my records collection and all these sort of things. It's like, but I do love records. Oh yeah, records.
Send Paul records.
Send me records.
Right, final question: what is the future of music technology?
What do I want it to be, or what will it?
What do you want it to be?
Well, anything but AI.
Why?
Because it's just destroying art. Now, I'm not saying you can't make good curated AI art, but if it then becomes a shortcut for everyone to make stuff, because they're going to say, I heard it in my head. No, bullshit. You just fucking press random. It's like these people, these random pattern generators. Don't use them. Don't use them.
Hang on.
Don't use random.
The de facto way of originally programming the 303 was pretty much just like.
Yeah, but at least it was it was your fingers. You did it. You did it. Well, it's actually the 303 writes its own patterns if you put it in the cupboard, according to the guy from Orbital. He's not wrong.
Oh, well, if it gets old enough.
There's an old video of Orbital. So he's talking about a 303 and they've got one, and he's like, oh yeah, you can put it in the cupboard and it writes its own patterns like a fine wine. He's taking the piss. But he's not wrong. He's not wrong, because this is the thing about the 303, the way it stores its memory, it needs a battery backup. But if you don't have battery backup on, then the memory is essentially scrambled. So when you switch it on, all the memory spaces, it's like they've got a rigid structure where it's looking for its pattern data. It's all scrambled, but it still reads pattern data. So it plays its own patterns. And sometimes you get patterns that don't even light the LED, but they still play. It's really weird. You get these like weird little loops. And some of the tracks, as the guy from Orbital says, he reckons some of the best tracks were written by the 303 themselves. And then you have to ask yourself, where does it come from? Where does it come from?
I feel like you are duty bound, because I've seen you can get like those memory starving things. Like they have it for pedals. There's a Eurorack, ADAC made a memory starver. Why don't you make a memory starving? I want a memory starving knob for my Re 303. Come on.
No, just take it in the toilet, flush it a couple of times, bring it back out. Let it dry, and then it will sound different for sure.
Okay.
No, don't. No, there's ways of emulating that memory starving. Just have a few beers before you start programming. That's one of the ways, and it's quite simple to. No, I think honestly, if we're gonna sum it all up with these things, the reason that I'm here doing this is because people still love them. I think we're at peak synthesizer right now. I don't think it's going to get much better. If anything, it's going to get worse. Because,
what sort of way? Because of AI? Or
no, not because of AI, because of the market saturation. I mean, look at Eurorack. I mean, in 2016, when I was at Superbooth for the first Superbooth, the Funkhouse one, that's when I realised I could continue making Eurorack modules for a couple more years, and I'm going to be phased out by. I need something unique to keep my head above this water. I mean, I had an early start, like I was trying to say earlier, before with the I Dream of Wire stuff. Before I Dream of Wires, I was in the scene already. So when that shit exploded, I got swept with the wave because all the people who got famous made big bits. I was friends with all these people. I was part of their little community, and I wasn't anywhere near their level. And when I was at Superbooth, the writing was on the wall. I was making a small living on modules, but it was nothing like what I do today. It wasn't living, but it was a little bit more modest. And it was, of course, when I see like teams of people and one guy, I mean, I got invited to, this is where they thought I was. The scene that year, they invited me to the Eurorack standards meeting, whatever this was. They were trying to, and they invited all the Muffwiggler people. Basically.
Eurorack standard is a bit of an oxymoron.
Yeah, exactly. No, but they were making some attempts to try and let's fix what can we do to make this a standard. And I was invited to that. I was flattered that I was invited to that, but I certainly wasn't selling enough modules to warrant being invited to that. I think it was more about that I was part of the scene. Do you know what I mean? They were just inviting.
Yeah.
So I was in there with all these fucking brainy people, and I'm like, oh my God, I'm so dumb. Imposter syndrome. It's like, but you can't be the smartest person in the room, but you're there because you're contributing something or whatever it was. I feel like I got really lucky, timing wise, when I started doing what I'm doing. I got lucky that I had made that pivot at the right year as well. I think leaving Eurorack behind was a good idea for me because I went on to do so much more with these things. Because when I did the 303, I met other people that were inspired by that, and then we worked together because I didn't do all these machines on my own. There's no way. I mean, with the 606, I did the 606, the 303, and the 101. And the 99 was done by Christian. And I don't need to say his surname, but he knows who he is. The 808, I was done mostly by Philippe, but I helped him with the digital aspect when we did, and of course some measurements, this, that, and the other. So I'm a small percentage involved in that. But he did the lion's share of the work on that. And the new project that we're working on, which I can't talk about also.
What is it?
I can't tell you, but when I do, you're going to
give me a clue.
You're going to shit your pants.
Oh, no, I'm all right. I'm not going to shit my pants.
Yeah, well, you will. Or you might wet your pants. I can't say anything. It's way.
Give me a clue.
Next year. You'll find out next year.
Clue?
I can't.
So the future of music technology is...
The future of music technology is a secret. As a techno Viking.
And is it something from the past? What's that? What is that the clue?
No, it wasn't.
Flipping me the bird.
No, 23. It's just to fucking make you think about like conspiracy theories and Volkswagens.
Oh fuck. Okay.
Have you seen that? Have you seen that German movie? It's 23.
No.
It's like a bit fringe. It's a true story about a guy who got manipulated by the Russian Secret Service, And he got into the number 23, because if you look in, number 23 comes up. It's one of those things that recurs a lot in folk.
Anything, if you go looking for
exactly.
it,
if you go, you'll find it. There's people who talk about any number, but he was really into this, and then they manipulated him, and he was a hacker. And it's a true story. But I don't remember if he killed himself or he went mad, or it was tragic for him in the end. But yeah, 23.
So what is the future of music technology?
23 or 42.
Good answer.
42, yes. You have to know the question.
Oh, yes. Anything but AI. And yes, the concept of the youthquake. It's a youthquake. I think that's a wonderful term. I've not heard that before. And it describes so much of what happens. I know now that I look at things and I'm like, I don't understand TikTok. I don't understand what the kids are talking, the Riz, it's just like, the kids are all right. I'm sure. I trust and have faith that the kids are all right, despite everything, social media and whatnot. I trust that kids will concern themselves with culture and creating art that speaks to them, whatever it may be. It's something that will probably offend me, probably needs to offend me in some level to be truly their own and truly new. Yeah, I didn't know about Paul's drum and bass background, and it almost makes complete sense now that he would then move from the complexity and specificity of making drum and bass, this highly technical form of music, to a more instant, free and, immediate form of making music, i.e. the type that you make when you've got a 101, a 303, an 808, and a 909. I will forever love these machines, and I will forever not agree with people who say, the 808's boring. There is always a time for an 808. Always. Not all the time. There's a time for the 808. Eternally. Anyway, wasn't Paul fun to talk to? He's just an absolutely brilliant character, and I am happier that we live on a planet that has Paul Barkers on it, fastidiously caring to the nth degree about every little nook and cranny of these weird boxes from Roland from the early 80s. Never was there a greater ambassador for them, even if he and obviously was a bit critical of some of the aspects of what they were doing, which is fair enough. Nobody's above criticism. I'm very glad that we live in a 101 possible, 303 possible world. If you want to check out Paul's stuff, go to re-303.com and not td-3.com, re-303.com. And that's a kind of little stub website that will take you through to the various places that you can find out more. Namely the shop where you can buy the sort of PCB and basic parts bundles. He doesn't do a complete parts thing for his machines. It is a more advanced build, there's no getting around that. You don't just build an 808 in a day. It requires commitment. However, you can buy the PCBs and the sort of sockets and switches and the little buttons, the beautiful, beautiful buttons of the 808, which Paul paid to have an injection mold created for, which is no mean feat if you know about the costs of such things. So Paul's commitment to making these parts available is certainly self-evident. And so, yeah, if you always wanted to own an 808, a 303, a 909 or a 101, and you want something that is actually the same as the ones that came off the line in Roland in the early 80s, obviously aside from the fact that they technically didn't, they came out of your hands here now when you build it, but something that uses literally the same parts, and to the extent that you could take his PCBs and you can put them into an actual Roland chassis and it would work the same. Which he does at the show, like Super Boo, the Hadler 101, the Re-101, inside an actual 101 with like an IKEA tub around the underside of it, just to make a point, which is to say his things are new versions of things that were available many decades ago. So, yeah, it's a time machine that lets you rebuild or create a new one of something that is otherwise quite clearly the decision has been made at Roland to not do this, to not chase the ghosts, as the saying goes. Fair enough. But I am glad that we can have both. I want a TR8 and I would love a Re 808. My goodness, yes. Although I do have the System 880, which flipping heck, that does scratch that itch. It's a very, very nice module. Check out Paul's stuff. Thank you, Paul, for talking. If you're enjoying Bleeps, please consider sponsoring on Patreon. That is patreon.com/Myla Melodies. And for the princely price of a coffee, you can contribute to your favorite podcast, continuing on a monthly basis, and maybe even more. If I could make a lot more money out of it, then I'd probably be able to hire some help. In fact, that would be insane, and do more of them. There is a lot of like admin and post sort of podcast work to like actually just publish. And then there's the other thing of promoting it, which I don't really do. So on that front, always feel free to tell your friends about the podcast. Share the episode if you've enjoyed this colossal Roland Festival. Thanks to our sponsors, Signal Sounds and Thonk, another amazing place if you like building things, thonk.co.uk, and obviously signalsounds.com. Thank you for your support to these most awesome of businesses. Well, friend, do you know what time it is? It's time to say bye.